All right, everybody. Welcome to the official Bay Area home buying workshop. If you're planning to buy a home in 2026, you're in the right place. So, our goal today is simple. We want you to leave comfortable, confident, and knowledgeable about your investment and about the process. So now you might be asking yourself, what qualifies us to host the official Bay Area buyer workshop? For just a few factors. So experience, production, and investment perspective. So on the experience side of things, we've done this for a long time in every type of market across multiple generations and backgrounds, ranging from second and third generation agents, past contractors, to interior designers. So on the production level, we're consistently active. We're not guessing. We're seeing the shifts as they happen as we work with clients. And lastly, from that investment perspective, we partner with investors and seasoned buyers, which allows us to spot market patterns early, think strategically, and we're supported by a team that includes experienced investors and homeowners ourselves. So speaking today on our panel, you're going to hear from a few. We've got Jason Smiley with Chase Mortgage to go over our lending questions and just general rate information, things like that. We've got Shannon Ellison. She's our sales manager on the team. She'll be going over a lot of buyer process, things like that as well. We've got Adam Bouzmahai. He will also be talking about general mistakes that first-time home buyers make and just around that process as well. And lastly, I will be the host today. My name is Chris Walker. I'm a third-generation real estate agent, and we're going to run through everything that we can for you today. So giving another shout out, not everybody on our team is speaking today, but we want to give them the credit they deserve. So you may have been invited by Marita or Farnaz, and we've also got Justin there, in addition to a ton of admin that we have on our team that is able to make this happen today. So with all of that going in, we want to wrap up in about 60 minutes, and we'll host a Q&A at the end as well today. So starting off, here are the topics we're going to cover today. Number one, understanding market conditions and what's ahead. 2, how to get pre-approved the right way. 3, how to select and work with a realtor. Next, navigating your home journey from start to finish. Then we've got tips for evaluating properties in neighborhoods like a pro. Also, avoiding common first-time homebuyer mistakes. And lastly, how to prepare an offer the right way. So those are going to be what we're diving into today. If you've had any questions while we're going, drop them in the chat and please send them to everyone so we can all see them and make sure we tackle your questions as they come up. And also take plenty of notes. You'll thank us later. There's a lot of information we're going to be throwing your way today. And stay tuned at the end because we'll show you how to stay in the know as well with the latest update, markets, changes, and insights. And lastly, one small but very important request we have from you. If you do find this workshop informative, please share it with others. We'll announce our future dates as well at the end of today and our very next workshop that we have coming up actually on Saturday in person. So with all of that, let's jump into our first topic today, which is market conditions and what's ahead for 2026. All right. So January 2026 market update. Everybody's curious to see what's going on as we get the year kicked off. I'm going to just start by saying this up front because it's the truth. There's nothing necessarily shocking or sexy about the market right now, but that's actually a good thing. It's healthy, and that's really what we want to see right now. So diving into there, here's really what we're seeing across the board. So the average sales price is up year over year for the third year in a row. So 2025, we saw modest appreciation, but still appreciation nonetheless, and all signs are pointing to more of the same for this year and coming across the board. So now the big change that buyers are going to feel at this point is what we're seeing with inventory. And so inventory has grown about 20% since the start of the year, which is pretty normal for this time of the year, all things considered. And then with that, kind of following up, we're seeing pending sales as well have risen to about 30% over the same period of time. So in this case, just seeing what we're looking at, pendings are outpacing inventory as we're starting the year just a little bit. And we were able to match that a little bit and kind of figure this would be happening with some of the applications that we were seeing for mortgages and things like that as we closed out the year and kicked off January as well. So as a matter of fact, this is actually the highest inventory we've had to start the year in 3 years, which is a pretty welcomed relief overall for buyers and a lot of people that we've been talking to at the same time. We're finally seeing some options pop up there, especially with what we've been seeing over the past few years. So pending sales are also at their highest level in 3 years. And so are purchase applications, which I had mentioned earlier, which is really the sign of future buyer activity that we're anticipating going into these starting months, and especially as we kick off the spring part of the year, which is really when we tend to see people pick up. Ironically, it's usually around the Super Bowl that we see a big shift in the market. So time will tell. So a lot of people will ask, what does that all mean? Altogether, it really just means that we're in a nice balanced market for both buyers and sellers. And honestly, we don't get to experience that much here in the Valley. So it'll be, it's kind of a nice opportunity zone, I think, for a lot of people, and a little bit of that relief that people are seeing, especially amongst a lot of news and everything that's coming across the way. So with that in mind, I think the next thing for us to really start tackling is talking about rates. So mortgage rates are hovering around about 6%, which is a relief from the 7 and 8% range that we've dealt with over the past couple of years. So now if you really think about it, money essentially costs about 25% less now than it did at those higher rates. And I know a lot of the talk around town has been affordability and things like that. So we actually are starting to see that relief. And we're really starting to get to that close to that point where we're approaching getting out of that rate lock zone. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But, you know, in short, it's a lot of people, especially that own homes right now, are sitting with 3% mortgage rates if they refinance during the time or bought during the pandemic or things like that. So all things considered, really what we're trying to push across the board here is we're seeing opportunity right now as we start the year. Time will tell what things are going to look like and if they pick up essentially across the board. So the other thing that we also want to always address, because I know there's tons of places to check out news from. We see headlines all the time. We've got social media, etc. So we really just want to address that with what we're seeing in the headlines. This is really what's throwing people off. And I think it can create some of that fear mongering or just clickbait type of stuff. So the two common headlines that you might be seeing right now are, number one, record low sales. So the truth is, when we're saying that record low sales headline, is it's pretty much a byproduct of record low inventory that we have, right? It's not really a sudden collapse in desire to buy homes, right? It's more of a supply issue that's been squeezing us. And that really goes back to that idea about we've got a lot of people like that bought their first time homes. They're not buying step up homes because they're really comfortable with those rates. And as we approach rates right now, which are hovering around the sixes, right, it's starting to get a lot closer for people to see it feasible to sell that primary home so that first time home buyers can move in. And we see some of those secondary purchases coming across the board. The next thing that we do want to go into is really the next headline is a spike in foreclosures, right? So you're going to see a number out there, usually hovering around like 20%. So here's really the reality of what we're seeing there across the board. That increase is largely due to the moratorium being lifted on FHA loans this year. So when we look at that from like a whole idea, right, a rise is really normal in that scenario from what we've been seeing. And even with that increase, foreclosures are still about 40% lower than pre-pandemic levels. And when we were looking at that, there was no concern about a foreclosure crisis at all at that period of time as well. So we'd have a long way to go for foreclosures to be any type of concern is really where we're getting at in this situation. Simply put, there's not a meaningful contingent of distressed sellers today, which I think is a lot of that worry that we're seeing across the board. People are looking pretty good when it comes to their mortgage rates. Buyers that are getting approved right now are looking really healthy. And so for the most part, like I said, we're seeing a healthy and normal market as we're stepping into 2026 here. So big picture, what do we really expect this year? So I think the best way to go into expectations is expect slow and steady, right? With rates fluctuating as always, and be prepared for that Silicon Valley effect, right? So the right property at the right price with consistently low inventory equals that competition. And that's really going to give an idea of what we're foreseeing coming up here at the same time. That is the formula in a nutshell. And here's also an important point to consider, that if you're planning on buying a home and staying 6 years or more, we usually don't see opportunities like this in the Bay Area very often. always throwing ratios and things like that out there, but I'd say realistically, we're probably in a seller's market about 70% of the time. And it's always funny when we compare our area to other areas. We've kind of got a unique thing going on here. But when we're really comparing, our percentages are going to be much, much, much different than what we're seeing on a national level. So we always say to take it with a grain of salt when you're reading those national headlines, because locally we see things a little bit differently here across the board. So overall, what we really want to watch is the microclimates that we're talking about. So at the end of the day, it's all about supply and demand, right? We want to watch inventory and the absorption rate. And that absorption rate, really what it is it's the amount of homes that are being bought up versus the inventory that's being available, right? So for simple terms, a 50% absorption rate would mean that 1 out of every 2 homes are selling is really a good place to put that. Usually around 60% is where we see it transitioning to a seller's market. And so we're hovering under those numbers right now, keeping that balance that we're looking at across the board. So with all of that diving in and being said, once again, a lot of this information is probably going to get lost just with the time and in due process. But you can always follow us for market updates on our YouTube. We break this down pretty much on the regular with real local data. We usually dive in on a monthly basis to what we're seeing across the board. And at the same time, we're trying to give good tips and tricks on a weekly basis to really see what's happening in the market at the same time. And once again, we have to say it again, there are always microclimates. So whether you're looking at single family homes, townhomes, condos, things like that, different areas of the Silicon Valley, whether you're central or on the outskirts, those are all going to have a little bit of different pace than what we're looking at overall. So with that being said as well, that goes back into the idea too, location matters. Just like the center of Mountain View, Sunnyvale versus those surrounding cities, like I was mentioning, schools are going to be a very big factor unless you're looking in an area that's mostly young professionals or lifestyle type of choices, right? Single family homes are going to carry those differences overall. So one of my favorite stories that we always like to share going into this kind of with this market data in mind is the original starter of this team, my grandpa, he had grew up in Cupertino, or not grew up in Cupertino, but had purchased a house in Cupertino. And at that point, he had purchased for $100,000, which is pretty insane to think about. And at that time, the whole city was up in droves. They were like, there's no way we can sustain this. This is not possible, right? Now that same home over time, right, is a multi-million-dollar property. And so it's one of those things, people always get a little shocked when it comes to prices, but we always have a rubber band effect one way or another that comes across. So the point is, this area rewards people who make thoughtful decisions and hold good assets long-term. And I think that's something to really consider when you're thinking about some level of purchase. And just to reiterate, we do that thorough update each month, annual predictions too. So if you want those fresh updates, YouTube is usually the best place to go to keep up with what we're putting out there. So with all that market things to be said and all those contexts, the next step is the most important practical step is really how to get pre-approved the right way. So I'm going to toss it over to Jason Smiley from Chase Mortgage. He is very well seasoned and has been around it and seen many, many markets as well. So I'm going to hand it off over to him, and he will go through that whole process. So take it away, Jason.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, so like you said, I'm in the mortgage side of things. I work for Chase. I've been in the business about 23 years now. So I've had some time to see a lot of different cycles in the market, a lot of rates going up and down. So before I get started, there's so much to cover on the mortgage side of things, and I can't cover it in the time that I have. So feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. Also, feel free to reach out, after the seminar. If you'd like to set up a consultation, we can go into more specifics of your particular situation and do an analysis, see what you're qualified for, see what your options are. Happy to do that, free of charge, of course. So let's go to the next slide. So what I want to talk about first is, maybe can you, there you go, shrink my picture a little bit. So in the news lately, especially yesterday, we had another Fed meeting, excuse me, and they stopped, they kind of put a pause on lowering rates. They've been on a lowering cycle the last, 4 or 5 months or so. But every time, the Fed has a meeting, there's news, and when they lower rates, everybody expects mortgage rates to go down with it. but that's not always the case. Rates tend to go in the same direction for the same reasons. Mortgage rates tend to be in anticipation of what the Fed's going to do, like I said, for the same reason. And it's usually based on inflation. So if there's concerns about inflation, if there's news about potential tariffs, mortgage rates tend to go up. If there's, thought that rates or inflation is going to go up. When the Fed lowers interest rates, though, that lowers the overall cost of financing and rates. So it generally goes in the same direction, as you can see on this chart. The thing I pulled this chart up for is just to give you a holistic perspective over the last 50 years on where rates have been, because we had a period of time where mortgage rates, a 30-year fixed, was around 3% plus or minus. And that was just a really unique time in history. And I don't know that anybody ever expects to see that again. Generally, a 6% mortgage rate is still actually pretty good historically. And that's about where we're at. Like Chris mentioned earlier, is, rates right now tend to be just above 6% is the kind of the national average. But in the Bay Area, we see rates that are a little bit lower. It's a little bit of an economies of scale thing because loan amounts are higher and it's a very competitive market for mortgage lenders. And so we tend to see a little bit lower rates than what we see nationally as far as interest rates go. Let's go to the next slide. So this is some of the forecasts that are out there for mortgage rates, what some of the economists and organizations expect rates to be towards the end of the year. The consensus tends to be around 6 to 6.3%. And I put this up here because I talk to a lot of people every day, a lot of home buyers that are probably a little over optimistic about where rates are going and thinking that rates are going to just keep going down and down and down. And we've seen a nice drop in rates over the last 6 months to a year, especially being that it's a sustained level where we're at now. For the last few months, we've been in the low 6% range, which is really prompting a lot of demand. So it's the beginning of the year, like Chris mentioned, activity tends to pick up. That in combination with rates generally being on the lower side, we're at about a 3-month low or 3-year low right now. We're seeing a lot more activity in the marketplace as far as demand goes, which kind of points to potential appreciation, the prices potentially going up, and it might end up getting to be more of a competitive market for buyers. We're kind of in like Chris said, we're in a nice little sweet spot right now. It's a pretty healthy, balanced market. So as far as application data goes, we look at that pretty closely because that tends to forecast the demand and where the prices are going, where the activity is going. And just in the last week, the last data that came out is that the application volume is up 14.1%. And that's following a week where it was up by 28.5%. So we've really seen a pretty big jump in application volume, which, like I said, tends to make it obvious that there's going to be more competition out there. The other reason I bring up this forecast is there's a lot of people that are, probably about 70% of the business I do is adjustable rate mortgages. I won't get into the specifics, but there's adjustable rate mortgages and there's fixed rate mortgages. The most popular denomination of these adjustable rate mortgages right now is a 7-year ARM. Now, a lot of people are just kind of blindly taking the 7-year ARM, thinking that, it's for sure that rates are going down from here. If you look at the long-term forecast for a lot of these economists and people that look at this, rates are actually, they're not expected to go down that much more than where they're at now. Maybe we'll get into the mid-5s. There's certainly a possibility of that, which that would be great. A lot of people can refinance, save money on their, the house that they bought and the mortgage that they have. But you are taking a risk with those 7-year ARMs. And so it's the conversation I've been having with a lot of people. And even then, it still makes sense. But it's good to talk to a professional just to analyze those differences and consider all of the things that you may not even be able to quantify. We can put a lot of numbers to things and see what the worst case scenarios are. But there's things like peace of mind when you have a 30-year fix versus a 7-year ARM where you can't put a number to that. And there's a lot of people that end up in tough positions when they take adjustable rate mortgages. For example, I'm talking to a lot of people right now that they got a 5-year ARM, and they're at ridiculously low rates, and they got it in 2021, back when rates were, a 5-year ARM was like at 2%. And it seemed really attractive at the time. But now when you consider that, compared to what it would have been with a 30-year fixed, it probably would have been better with a 30-year fixed at the time. So it's something to think about. And the reason that you need a professional on your side, on the mortgage side of things, just to weigh all those options, make sure that you're thinking of all the right things. And let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about getting pre-approved. And I'm just going to, go over this really, really quickly. But the steps in getting pre-approved is just first start talking to a loan officer, to have that initial consultation. And in that consultation, beforehand, make a list of questions that you want to get answered. It helps to use AI, by the way. Some of the most informed buyers that I'm talking to are using AI just to prepare those questions. And some of them may not be relevant to our marketplace, but at least I'll be able to explain why. Anyway, have that initial consultation. Usually takes 30 to 45 minutes. And we go over a lot of information, things like what's a debt to income ratio? How does that affect your maximum purchase price? How much do you need for the down payment? Which, by the way, it may be less than you think. What's mortgage insurance? What's a conforming loan compared to a jumbo loan? So there's a lot of things to cover, but I do it all the time. I can usually cover it within 30 to 45 minutes and then answer any questions you might have. After that, complete an application. Shouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes. Most of them are online for most lenders. And then you have to provide the necessary documents, things like pay stubs or W-2s or possibly tax returns, or for more complex scenarios, you might have to provide income related to bonus income or RSU income. Things are kind of specific to our area. So once you provide all of that to the loan officer, they're going to go through the application, the documents, and then they're going to do some kind of a credit check. Here at Chase, we just do a soft pull. And if you don't know what that is, a soft pull of your credit is where it doesn't have an impact on your credit score. So that's what we do initially, just for the sake of getting you pre-approved. Eventually, we'll have to do a hard inquiry, which does have an impact on your credit score. But initially, a soft pull is kind of an easy way to go about getting it done, checking your credit. And another benefit of going through this process early, which is another important step, is to have somebody that's an expert review your credit. Because there may be, an instance where maybe you have a balance on your credit card that if you had a lower balance compared to the limit on the card, maybe your credit score could be 20, 40 points higher. That could save you thousands and thousands of dollars. So it's good to do that early, because any changes you make to your credit is going to show up a month or two later. So you need a little bit of leeway and not just say, I want to put an offer in on a house. I need to get pre-approved within a day. It pays to do this early. And maybe there's nothing that we need to do, but it's always good to double check. And there's really no downside to getting pre-approved early. So that's the right way to do it. A little bit about Chase and mainly why you want to work with somebody local. The Bay Area is really unique in the way that real estate operates. And as far as timelines, you have to operate much more quickly. You're expected to close within 2 to 3 weeks from start to finish, whereas other parts of the nation, 30 to 45 days is pretty common. So the timelines need to be, you have to be prepared and have your operations set up so that you can close really quickly and do all the due diligence up front so that you're not stumbling along in the beginning of the process. The other thing is local customs. In the Bay Area, it's been a custom for decades now. It's been a long time, but there's something in an offer where it's called contingencies. We won't get into the details of this, but it's basically the way that a buyer can back out of contract if they decide that they don't want to buy the house anymore, or maybe the financing fell through, or maybe the appraisal didn't come in at the purchase price. So these contingencies are generally in place for most of the country. In the Bay Area, it's very, very common to see offers go out with no contingencies, because generally it's a pretty competitive market and you're going up against other offers. And so you want your offer to stand out as much as possible, but you want to do it responsibly. You don't want to talk to a loan officer out in the Midwest at a call center, and they're just not used to looking at it from that lens and thinking, well, they're going to put an offer in and they're not going to have any backup plan. So somebody that's a local mortgage pro is going to know that we need to have a plan B and a plan C. And if we don't have those, you really just need to know the risks of going in with no contingencies and what's on the table. Generally, that's 3% of the purchase price, which is your initial deposit. So that's a really important piece there, because you need advice along the way. And it's really hard for somebody outside of the area to kind of understand that part of the market. The other thing that helps too is when you're submitting offers, it helps for the listing agent that you're presenting the offer to know the loan officer that they're working with. And I've done thousands of transactions around the Bay Area. I've worked with many of the top producers in the Bay Area. And so I generally have my name is known, if I don't know them personally. And so that tends to help a little bit too. And maybe that improves the terms, or maybe if you have an offer that's the same as someone else, maybe it gives us a little bit of advantage. So having somebody local helps with that as well. And lastly, I'm just going to finish up just by talking a little bit about Chase and what we do really well. Chase is very competitive when it comes to jumbo financing, and you can imagine that the Bay Area is pretty heavy on the jumbo side of things, and jumbo being anything that's above basically a 1.25 million loan amount is considered a jumbo. So we have competitive rates on jumbo. We have a 21-day close guarantee, which kind of goes along with what I said before, that we're expected to close very quickly. And I know there's kind of a perception out there that big banks, might be slow and cumbersome, but our operations are set up to serve the Bay Area market, and we move very quickly as we need to, and we have a guarantee to back that up. The last thing is we have, like many banks, we have relationship discounts. So if you have a relationship with us, with Chase or JP Morgan, then you're likely to get discounts on the interest rates, and even making it more attractive as far as the rates are concerned. So that's all I have to say. Like I said, drop any questions in the chat, and my contact information will be out there somewhere. Feel free to reach out, and we can set up a consultation where we can go a little bit more into detail on everything that you need to know.
Thank you so much, Jason. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and I always feel so comfortable referring my clients over to you because you always give them the right information, and it's super trustworthy. So thank you so much. Just want to reaffirm any questions that we have for our people watching live. Please drop them in the comment section, and we will field them live. So thanks, guys. I'm going to move on to our next section. And that is how to select and work with a realtor. And this is a really important one because it's the very beginning step of most buyers' purchase process. So choosing the agent should be one of the number one things you start with. And it's not always about picking the biggest name or trusting your cousin that just got their real estate license. It's really about finding the truth and finding the right fit for you. And their expertise. And when I say expertise, I really, really want to stress that it should be a non-negotiable. So we're going to start with a few myths that are out there. The first one being the access myth. And it's agents that say, I have all these properties for sale that nobody else has. It's always a little bit maybe of a red flag if they're saying this. Maybe there's coming soon properties, but all agents have access to the MLS, and there may be some opportunities. But somebody that's inflating the amount of access they have to all of these properties that no other agents have, I would say is a little bit of an access myth or a red flag. I would ask deeper questions about that. Next is the friendship trap. Just because an agent is a friend or they happen to have a license or maybe they just got their license doesn't necessarily mean they're the best fit for you and your goals. It's important to remember that a vast minority, very small amount of agents in the area do the vast majority of the business. So when you're interviewing, interview for skills, interview for experience, not just that relationship alone, although the relationship is important because trust is important. But in addition to interview for skill and experience. I always say, ask yourself, would you write a check to your friend for $30,000 to $50,000 just because you like them? Something to think about. And next is the vaulted promise. I would be aware of agents that make hefty promises and crazy results without any hard evidence or experience to back it up. And then beware of any agent with stale practices, those that are relying, for example, solely on like outdated methods, or those that don't invest in data-driven marketing and processes. Remember, the industry in real estate, as is many other industries, is always evolving. So ask your agent, how are you utilizing AI in your workflows? Are they using ChatGPT or some other form like Perplexity of AI in their business? Because if I had to bet, I would say you probably are. So are they. Next is you're going to meet and you're going to interview with intention. And this is either in person or over Zoom. I don't recommend just a simple phone call. First impressions really matter, where you can see body language and spend real time, like 30, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, and dig deep, dig beneath just surface level conversation. You really want to treat it like a partnership interview. Just don't rush this part. Ask so many questions, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and probe an agent on their experience, their style, their support systems, and just their overall approach in business. These questions that dig deep are going to expose their true expertise. Hire slow and fire fast. Research them thoroughly, compare agents, look at their reviews, and don't hesitate to move on to the next potential agent if you just feel like it's not a good fit. In this instance, your confidence and your decisiveness are actually assets. And then just be clear on your intentions. You want to communicate your particular wants and needs and standards clearly, because the more precise you are, the better that agent can deliver. Unfortunately, we've not evolved to be mind readers yet, although that would be amazing, but we haven't quite got there. And we understand that things may change in your criteria over time, but this is why an agent's communication skills are so, so important. Next, you want to compare agents as apples to apples, because there's a lot of different types. So define what service means for you. Are you more of a full service, high touch communication, cutting edge tools, or are you just looking for a discount? Because there's different agents and they offer different services by necessity. So interview different agents with the same service philosophy, and you'll find that limited service agents are far different from full service agents, and the fees are going to vary to reflect that. You also want to check for their education commitment. The best agents offer educational resources like workshops or comprehensive guides for clients or prospective clients to help guide the process. And then detailed support. You want to seek agents with a focused support team working for them to really help streamline your experience. Be sure you guys have consistent meetings. There are vendor relationships that they have that they can refer. They have disciplined systems, because it really does make a difference in your client experience. And then taking action. So you're reviewing references, you're reviewing their results, ask them for testimonials, performance history, and successful negotiation examples or stories about where they really excelled for somebody. I think you can learn a lot about an agent through stories. And then make sure you're understanding the contracts, all the fees associated. They should be able to clearly and confidently explain all the agreements, the terms, and any recent changes in laws or industry standards in terms that you can understand. And just expect honesty and adaptability. And agents who are not afraid to tell you a tough truth. In real estate, you do not want a yes person, because it's not about hearing what you want to hear. It's about partnering with someone who educates you, they empower you, and they're going to deliver you modern results. And sometimes that means no sugarcoating. It may be not always what you want to hear, but the truth is going to save you time and money in the long run. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the buyer broker options. There's just two main agreements that you have to sign with buyer agents now. And the first one is if you're just testing the waters and you don't know if you want to commit long-term to this agent yet, but it's a single property buyer broker representation agreement. Like I said, it's great if you just want to test the waters. You go tour a single property with them, and if you end up writing on that property, that's the only time you would have to use that agent. But the more common one we're seeing lately is the longer-term buyer broker representation agreement, which is California law now. You have to have one if you're working with someone, but only for up to 90 days is the max that can be on that agreement. And then if you don't find a house within that 90 days, you can always update the form for another 90 days, no problem. Sometimes we hear from buyers, oh, well, the seller agent promised me a deal or a rebate to make an offer through them. And we could go on and on with stories about how this can be a sticky situation, but I'll just share one. We had a buyer, or we didn't have them. We know of a buyer in a Cupertino community that did just that in a changing market. They thought they were going to get a deal by going through the listing agent. They were the only offer, and they ended up paying $120,000 over the asking price. And they were the only offer. I don't know. You can surmise how much of a deal that was by going through the listing agent, but that does happen. So it always pays to have somebody that's in your corner, that's advocating for you, and is making sure that you're getting the best deal in a certain situation. Because the number one cause of lawsuits in real estate, guys, is either a lack of improper disclosure or in those dual agency situations where the buyer is represented by the seller agent as well. That is going to round us up there. If there are any questions in the chat, I don't see anything there. So go ahead and move on to the next section.
All right, there we go. Thank you, Shannon. Shannon does a good point of driving home. Just like communication is so important across the board here. And it's same thing across what Jason is saying too. You really want to be prepared for these things. And I think a lot of people dive headfirst into just trying to figure it out themselves. But honestly, it saves you so much time, money, honestly, and headaches if you just have these conversations up front. There's so many little nuances to kind of stepping around that initial obstacle of learning things. So thanks for diving into everything, Shannon. Really appreciate you communicating everything across the board. All right, so next up, what we're really going to dive into here is really just the overview of the whole home buying process or journey, right? So to preface this, I could talk about this for 60 to 90 minutes. There are so many little things that go along this entire process. Typically, when we sit down with buyers, we usually unpack over 2 different meetings just to make sure we're kind of in line and understand what to expect in those milestones. So I'm going to try to keep it as short and sweet as I can when it comes to this. And later down the line in this workshop as well, people will go over some of these items. So I'm just going to touch on them a little bit lightly. So let's get into this. So this is where buyers really go from feeling uncertain to feeling in control, right? And so starting from a high level, very first case, interview multiple realtors. I think Shannon did such a great job of explaining everything there. There are these statistics that come out, and it is pretty insane how many people end up going with the very first real estate agent they sit down and meet with. And going back to our numbers, right? Like a ton of agents didn't even do an actual transaction last year. So just take the time, get the right people in your corner. You got to find the right fit. And that is so, so important when it comes to that first step. And just having those connections and that right education so you can step in confidently. So then next process we'll go in, and Jason really hit it on the head, is going into loan pre-approval, right? So just really make sure you got one of these, or at least have a really good idea. Sometimes things will surprise you when you go chat with a lender. Avoid making any unnecessary purchases, things like that. You really want to have that pre-approval, because if that home pops up, that's perfect for you. If you don't have that pre-approval ready, you're realistically not going to be able to write on that house. Even going a step further and getting underwritten is even more helpful. So just have that in line. Understand what you're comfortable with your mortgage payment, right? And just go look at houses that are within your budget. So many people will go out, look at homes that are extremely expensive, or look at homes that they think is within budget. They get their pre-approval back, and now they're comparing new homes that they're seeing to the really nice homes that were above their budget. And it just makes a really hard home searching process going across the line. So that's loan pre-approval across the board there. Really just get that done as early as possible. So next we're going to go into like wants and needs to our homes, right? Really try to figure out a couple things across the board. Keep it simple, put together a pros and cons list. What's more valuable to you, right? Open spaces versus room sizes. Really think about these things. check out neighborhoods at night, realize traffic, understand schools, right? These are all really important. You don't want to have these surprises down the line after you found something. So that becomes really important across that process. And it's the most fun part about the whole journey. So once we've done that, we're kind of going to shift into making an offer, but realistically, we want to do our due diligence upfront. So due diligence is extremely important in our market as well, mainly being because we're in a lot of non-contingent situations. So when it becomes more of a seller's market, like I said, 70% of the time, and we're up against other offers, we're usually going to have to drop those contingencies. And so we want to know everything we can about that property so that we're making a confident and like educated risk decision moving into our offer scenario, right? So going over there really, really lightly, we just want to see title, right? Just make sure nothing odd's going on with the property, no liens. It is title's responsibility to hand over a clear title to you through the entire process. So they have your back, at least on those manners. But we also want to make sure there's no surprising closing costs or anything like that that's going to come up for that area. Going into inspections really quickly, when it comes to inspections, right, most homes that we look at are going to at least have a property inspection. Likely they'll also have a termite inspection, those types of things. We just really want to dive into those beforehand. If they don't have inspections, usually we're going to have a contingency to do our own inspections later. You can always get your own inspection even after you've written an offer. It just depends on what you can do with it, depending on level of contingencies. Then we're going to go in disclosures, right? Disclosures is everything the sellers are going to share with us about the property, its history, what they know, right? And we're going to really want to make sure that we're cross-referencing those disclosures to the property inspection as well. If you're ever in a situation where you're working with an agent and they just send you the disclosures and say, hey, please review these, let's go write an offer, that is a huge red flag. They should be going over that with you. While you may understand it and be savvy to a level, there's a lot of things to really understand what to look for in those disclosures as well. And that goes into insurance, just making sure everything looks good across the board there. Insurance is kind of a tricky situation right now. So just getting that done as soon as you can is going to be a lot helpful to make sure you have a successful close. And then lastly, HOA. Say we're looking at townhomes, condos, a lot of these are going to have HOAs. We want to make sure the HOA is healthy. We want to make sure that there's not going to be any expected hikes or special assessments because they're, replacing the entire playground or something like that, right? We want to make sure that those things are taken into effect across the board. And so if we have these, and once again, we go into making an offer, now we're really going to understand what we're looking at. I didn't go over comps as well, but comps, we just really want to understand what's pending in the area. That's going to be our most up-to-date information on what's going on in that neighborhood, right? Usually we want at least 3 solid comps in an area. More is preferred. And that's going to give us an idea too of like comparing location, level of updates, perceived value of certain reasons, schools, right? All of those things take into effect. We really can't just go straight across the board, price per square foot average for the neighborhood, right? Or what this estimate says, right? We always like to joke around. The CEO of Zillow ended up selling his home for like 40% less than his estimate. So always a fun one there. But those are important. So moving into making that offer, we got a few different aspects. We've got price, we've got contingencies. We've talked about those, right? And a few other things in there. This is where we can decide certain concessions that we can ask for if it's less competitive, right? Or things like that. If it's a more competitive situation, we're going to want to remove as much friction as we can, but also keep ourselves protected moving forward. So all of those are important. Like I said, that offer scenario is a really detailed process. So always happy to dive into that in a more detailed manner if you'd like some level of follow-up here. So now we've made our offer. Hopefully the good news, we just get our offer accepted outright. The other things that can happen is we get countered. It can be a single counter. It can be a multiple counter to other offers. That's all going to really play in that scenario. And that's where the real fun happens in the negotiations. And that's why you want to make sure you have somebody strong knowing how to negotiate in this scenario when we have that situation. So let's assume our offer is accepted. The next thing we're going to go moving forward and do is our initial deposit. That is 3% of the total purchase price most typically. And that 3% is part of your down payment. So your down payment is 20%. We're taking 3% from that 20% that goes in within those 24 hours. Now we're going to move back, and this is where due diligence can kind of become its part, is now we can still get any additional inspections. If we have contingencies, right, we can go get that additional property inspection. Say we find something, we can come back now, renegotiate, walk away from the home. Sometimes that's the best thing to do if we find major foundation issues. But a lot of the time, things can be negotiated, and a lot of these big issues that come up, it can actually play to your favor depending on the type of effort that you want to put into finding a home and those types of things. So moving on from there, we'll remove our contingencies. If we didn't have contingencies, we've already committed to this house, point of no return. Now, if we had contingencies and we remove those, now we were fully committed to the property, right? So if we were to back out, get cold feet, right, that's where you could be liable for losing that deposit in this scenario. So very important to remember that. From there, the appraisal gets ordered. That's just the bank coming in and making sure that the home is worth what you're paying for it. That's why locking in the comps is really important, in understanding those deviations and like how much over it might go and really what it's worth. So once we've got our appraisal locked in, we'll move on to overall loan approval. The main reason why we're looking at 21 to 30 days is usually by the loans. So we're going at the pace that they can get things closed up. Once we have that loan approval, we're going to move forward. We already talked about this: renegotiating, removing contingencies, walking away, right? All of these are factors that come in a little earlier in the process. So then next up, we're going to want to schedule move, figure out utilities coming up, and we're going to go into the next three: the final walkthrough, signing the closing documents, and then depositing your closing funds. All happen around the same time, usually a couple days to 3 days before we close. So that final walkthrough, we walk in, we make sure that everything is as we purchased it. Nobody put any holes in the walls. There was no wild parties thrown, all of that good stuff. And then we check off any items that we find. We can make sure that we get those taken care of before we close, right? Just if there's any discrepancies, right, or anything that needs to happen. And so that's really our last point of being able to keep ourselves protected and getting anything alleviated that needs to be. So after that, we'll go ahead and we'll set your sign off. There, we'll go over your net sheet, make sure all the numbers line up, sign a ton of papers that you've already signed plenty of times, because we live in California. Everybody loves to sue each other. And then from there, once you've signed off, that goes out to the county recording, and you also send over your depositing funds. And hopefully that day you get to know that you've closed on your house and you officially own your home. So with that mouthful, that is really what we're looking at on that buying process journey. So on that, I will toss it back over to Shannon, and she's going to start talking about how to evaluate properties in neighborhoods like Pro.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Remember, guys, that whole process from start to finish, from when you're interviewing a realtor to the very end, can be probably at minimum, if you're in your home search, like 3 months or more. So he just crammed so much time into that small flow chart. So remember, there's a lot more you could talk about that flow chart for like an hour, but he did hit the main points, and we're here through every step of it the entire way. And just a reminder for you, those of you watching online, feel free to drop any comments or questions in the chat, and we will make sure to get to them. Okay, so we're moving on to tips for evaluating properties, and it's my favorite part of real estate because it's when you're out in the field and you're in the houses, and who doesn't love looking at houses for sale? I know that I do, so I'm sure that you do as well. And number one for evaluating properties is I'm going to start with schools, because it is one of the biggest drivers of property value, especially in our area. The better the schools, the more desirable the location, and therefore the higher prices of the homes. There could be one street dividing a neighborhood that has 2 different high schools with different ratings, and the homes could be, I'm not kidding you, $200,000 to $300,000 difference in values, maybe even more. So, and even if you don't have school-age children and you're not looking for a specific school, knowing about the schools is a really great factor for future resale or future rental purposes. Next is street location. Is the home on a through street, or is it on a cul-de-sac? Is it at a stop sign intersection? There's going to be so much more noise of stop and go traffic at those locations, but you might save money on the purchase price. Of course, depending on how hot the market is when you're purchasing. Which leads perfectly into noise and nuisances. Don't just tour a home with your eyes, but close your eyes when you're at the property and just listen. Are you hearing planes, trains? Is the BART station next door? Are you hearing the neighbors barking dogs, or neighborhood chatter, or just the neighbors in the backyard? Because those are going to be factors that you'll be living with for a long time to come. So listen with your ears as well. We can refer to the disclosures in many cases where the seller is going to disclose these things. But if you think about it, after an owner has lived in a home for 10 plus years, they might not even notice certain noises anymore. So you don't want to rely just on the disclosures, but visit the property multiple times if you need to really get a sense for the property itself. You're going to notice it for at least the first few months that you live there. Next is views. Views obviously affect a property's desirability. Is it a view of the hills and the mountains? Maybe a buyer is going to pay a lot more for that type of view. And remember to look for things that are not conducive to the view, like power lines and power towers, or just be aware of the lack of a view as well. If it's in a townhome community, where do your windows look into when you're looking out? You might be staring right at a neighbor's living room. So feel free to open those blinds when you're going through the homes as well. Walkability. Some are going to see value in being close in walking distance to major amenities, whereas other people are going to be more keen on being further away from downtown life. But if you're okay with the further commute times, you might save money on purchasing a home that's on the outskirts as opposed to somewhere central or a downtown location. Just know your preference and set your search radiuses accordingly. Next is the commute time. I'm sure you guys noticed that the majority of tech companies here in the heart of Silicon Valley, like Sunnyvale and Mountain View, Santa Clara, and the closer that you get to these areas, the more expensive the homes get. So decide how far you want your commute to work to be and draw your search radius accordingly. I always recommend that my clients drive the commute at the times that they're going to be doing that every day, at least one time, to really get a feel for the drive that they're going to be living with for at least the next several years while they're at that job. We'll move on to future developments. This one's a big one, guys. City websites are such a great resource to find what permits have been filed for projects that are in the planning phases near the neighborhoods that you're looking in. This is going to help you decide if it might help or maybe it hurts future property value long term. But it's usually going to be things like parks or a school or maybe a church or a community center. You want to know about these things, visit those city websites, use them as a resource. They're really helpful. Next is types of lots. You want to know the sizes and the usability of the lots important. A 15,000 square foot lot might look great on paper, but it might not be twice as desirable as a 7,500 square foot lot that is on a large hillside with less than half of it being usable space. So really pay attention to topography and the shape. Is it pie shape? Is it rectangular? Does it support maybe doing an additional unit on the property, like an ADU or an addition? So pay attention to the shape as well. Hazard zoning, this is an important one. It can affect not really the property value in a huge way, but it does affect property insurance if you are in a high-risk zone, like a special flood zone or a very high-risk fire zone. You can find out this information in a document in the disclosure package called the NHD, and that stands for Natural Hazard Disclosure. And you can see where a certain property is going to fall in relation to those zones. Next is property facing. This one brings a big value for a lot of the cultures in our area that practice Vastu or Feng Shui. Property direction, it can affect value or desirability, but not so much during our very low inventory and competitive markets like we see here in the Bay Area. It's possible maybe now that sweet spot could pose a time where you can be a little bit more selective on property facing, but maybe not for long as we head into the spring market with the activity that we're seeing picking up. Next is the nicest home on the block. It's not always the best plan. Being the worst house on the block could actually be better for value because of all the bigger, more upgraded homes around it that bring up the land value that it's on. In the Bay Area, remember, it's not necessarily about the building structure itself that holds the value. The main value of your property is not the materials, but the land that it actually sits on. And this is one of the big driving forces of appreciation in our area, is there is just a lack of new land to build on. So combine that with low supply, our consistent increasing buyer demand, prices here tend to stay stable or move upwards most of the time. Next is multi-units nearby. When you are out touring properties, you want to consider driving up and down the parallel streets to see if there's any Anything like multifamily, small apartment buildings nearby, places like that have a high concentration of renters in the area, and they can have an effect on home values nearby over time as well. Technically, the less rental turnover an area has, the better it's going to be long term for values. Next is cost of upgrades. This is a really big one and an important one. Considering cost and being realistic. A good agent is going to be able to ballpark the cost of things that need to be done. And the reality is there's a lot of old homes in the Bay Area. You're going to tour a lot of older homes that need upgrading, they need work. And knowing the cost, the real cost of those is such a big time saver for you. So you're not overestimating things. So having an agent that knows how to ballpark cost of floors, kitchen and bath remodels, the cost of new appliances. It's like I said, it's so easy for buyers to, especially in the beginning, or that have never owned a home before, to overestimate the cost of some fixes and repairs. Yes, there's expensive ones, but yes, a lot of them are also less than you would think. I just don't like seeing buyers turn away very good homes because they weren't realistic about the cost that minor things needed to be fixed actually costed. So we can help discern what's important and tackle short-term items versus the things that can maybe wait 6 to 12 months. Next is talking to the neighbors. And this is really the best way to find out the truth of a neighborhood. I have knocked doors on either side and even the whole street for buyers that were out and about. They were ready to offer on this home. And we're like, let's go talk to the neighbors and just see what they think about the neighborhood. And you'd be surprised to find out some interesting facts that we would not have found out otherwise unless we went to go knock on those doors, because it wouldn't have been in the disclosures. So knock the neighborhood doors. Your agent should have no fear to do that as well. Next is due diligence. Be sure to review all disclosures, and Chris really nailed it on this one as well. All the reports and documents with your agent before making the offer, especially a non-contingent offer. You guys, there's calculated risk with these. So you have to know everything in those disclosure packages to be able to confidently make a non-contingent offer. There's no inspection provided, get an inspection. We have all the references and trusted inspectors that we've worked with for so many years. And some parting thoughts before I hand it back on over is just remember, when you are out there and you're looking at homes, you have your checklist in your head and you're looking for a property. You find one that checks so many of your boxes and you're like, wow, this is the perfect house. Chances are that it's checking a lot of other people's boxes as well. So if you love the home, you're comfortable with that mortgage payment, make an offer. Don't let it pass. Why? Because that closing price, especially as we move into the spring market, is now going to be the new benchmark for that size home in that neighborhood. So get in there while you can, lock your rate, and watch your values rise for years to come. Hey, Adam, I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with the sound. We're not able to hear you. You want to try to log out and log back in? Sorry, guys. Thanks for your patience. Try to get Adam's sound here back on. Oh, we still can't hear you, Adam. Adam? Unmute. Thank you guys for your patience. All right, I think I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna take over this section. We just need the slides to change behind for avoiding first-time homebuyer mistakes. Adam, if you're able to get that, microphone working, we can easily hop you back in here. All right. So avoiding common first-time homebuyer mistakes. A lot of this you guys have heard already today, but we're going to reiterate it because we know the importance of it. Number one is not understanding the cost of upgrades or overestimating them, which I talked about a little bit earlier. So important. It's going to help you make a confident offer. Next is not understanding the risks of non-contingent offers. Your agent should be able to go over this with you so you are completely aware of what it really means and the risks of a non-contingent offer. Unfortunately, in this area, the reality is that a lot of us are going to have to make a non-contingent offer to get the house because the winning offer often waives all of their contingencies. So understanding those risks before going in is going to put you in the best position. Adam, we can hear you. Awesome.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. Let me just
All good.
Okay. I'll take it from the top really quickly because I know we're getting pressed on time, but we'll start off with not interviewing multiple agents and or looking at homes before this step. So most first-time home buyers don't realize they're essentially choosing business partners for one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives. So interviewing multiple agents can really help you understand experience levels, strategies, communication styles, and who is going to truly advocate for you. So the right agent doesn't just open those doors for you. They protect you and your investment, and they also guide you along the way. All right. Next up, we have choosing the wrong type of agent. Good agents are going to be more educational, and then some agents are really merely transactional. Not all agents operate the same way. So some are order takers. They're really just open doors, as I mentioned. They write up contracts. Other agents are going to be true educators. They're going to explain risks, strategies, contracts, and those long-term impacts of buying the house that you want. A limited service agent may really seem like a good idea at first, but a full service educational agent is often going to save you tens of thousands of dollars in mistakes and in negotiation power. We've seen this with some people making large purchases before buying a home or during the process. So before you close on your home, Jason touched on this a little bit, your credit score is going to be pulled. So buying a new car, opening a credit card, or financing furniture, for example, that can really change your DTI or your debt to income ratio and even cause your loan to be denied at the last minute. And we don't want that for you. So always talk to your lender like Jason before any major purchase. Your best rule of thumb, just no major purchases before you buy your home. All right, next up is not understanding your budget. Now, many first-time home buyers only look at that mortgage payment and they actually forget about the other payments that can come up, like the property taxes, insurance, HOA fees, utilities, just to name a few. So a home can feel affordable at first until that full monthly picture hits. And a real budget should be based on total ownership costs, not just a loan. Next up, we've got not getting pre-approved. We know that some people like to window shop. So without that pre-approval, you're really just shopping blind. You don't know your true buying power and you can miss out on a great home. That pre-approval prevents you from getting that emotional heartbreak that we see from time to time of falling in love with a home that you were never qualified to buy, or you just didn't have your ducks lined up, right? Next up, not understanding closing costs. Again, it's not just the mortgage, but closing costs are real money items that show up at the end of the transaction. You've got lender fees, escrow fees, title fees, insurance, and other prepaid items. And many first-time home buyers are kind of shocked because they never planned for those things. So knowing your estimated closing costs up front really avoids that last-minute panic. Next, we have not reviewing disclosures, HOA docs, or getting the proper inspections. Again, this was touched on earlier, but disclosures and inspections exist to protect you, the buyer. So skipping them or rushing through them can mean inheriting structural problems for the house, potential lawsuits, special HOA assessments, or uninsurable properties. Now, this is where buyers really and your agents really can help protect you, or this is where you can get burned. So you definitely do not want to be the latter. Quick story for you guys. I actually had a client whose home I sold in San Jose. And about a year later, I found out that she'd bought an out-of-area condo. I was a little bit confused, and I asked her why she didn't call me to help her with the purchase. And she said, she thought it was too far away. I didn't serve that area. So long story short, she told me she used a random agent to help her. And that agent didn't actually sit down and review the disclosures with her. And within a few months of her owning the condo, she was actually slapped with a special assessment. I don't remember the exact figure, but it was over $10,000. She was super upset because she felt blindsided. And again, these types of situations happen all the time, but they can usually be foreseen with a thorough review of the HOA docs. And a strong agent is going to help you with that. Sit down and review those disclosures with you guys. Next up, we have not understanding the costs of upgrades, or on the flip side, overestimating the costs. Some first-time home buyers underestimate renovation costs and they get financially overwhelmed. Others overestimate the cost and walk away from homes that really are a great fit for them, and maybe they only need a little bit of work. So having realistic estimates can help you make confident, smart decisions. And again, your realtor should be able to help with that. We also touched a little bit on non-contingent offers, but not fully understanding the risks of those non-contingent offers. Our Bay Area market tends to move really quickly, and oftentimes it takes a non-contingent offer to win a home, especially if you're going up against multiple offers. So removing contingencies can help you win that home, but it also shifts the risk onto you, the buyer. So if financing fails, if inspections reveal major problems, or the home doesn't appraise, you, the buyer, could lose your deposit. Now, this is something we want to work through strategically. It's a strategic move, not a casual one. And again, each strategy is going to vary with each home and each scenario. This one's been popping up more and more lately, and this is shopping for insurance too late. Some buyers wait until the last few days to get their insurance and discover that the home is really hard to insure due to fire zones, past claims, or roof issues. Now, this can delay or even kill a deal, and buyers can again lose their deposit by waiting. So this is something you want to really focus on at the beginning of the search to understand what those costs are going to be, if the home is insurable, all of those things. We see this, and this is one I probably would say we see not only with first-time home buyers, but with a lot of buyers, and this is trying to nickel and dime in negotiations and losing out on the home that they really want. Fighting over small dollar amounts can really cost you the entire house. And in competitive markets, sellers are going to choose those clean, strong, confident offers, not the ones that are the cheapest, asking for endless counter demands. And this is where strategy really matters more than saving every last dollar. That's the house that you really want. And then lastly, again, something that we hear a lot, not just from first-time home buyers, but from people who've bought multiple homes. And this is looking for a deal, or just, I'm going to wait it out. We all want a deal, but many buyers end up just sitting on the sidelines, hoping that perfect house kind of falls into their lap, or trying to time the bottom of the market. The truth is, the best opportunities often go to those prepared buyers who act strategically, not emotionally or fearfully. We never know when the bottom of the market hits until it's behind us. And by then the market is appreciating again. So the best advice that I can give you guys in a nutshell is, if you like the area, you like the layout, you're comfortable with the total mortgage, and you plan on being there for like 5 to 7 years at least, then it usually makes sense to submit a strong offer. All right. And that's it for me.
Nice, Adam. Thank you so much.
Glad we got the mic figured out.
Yeah, no, you did great. Thank you guys so much for your patience. We are coming up here on the last section, and that is how to prepare an offer the right way. A lot of agents can prepare an offer, but there is a right way and a strategic way to do it. So we're going to go over the best ways here, what your agent should be doing to give you the highest chances for an offer acceptance. And I'll preface with the relationship really starting as early as visiting the open house with and seeing the listing agent, and being for the first time in person there with them. That relationship starts there at that meeting if your agent's with you. And then after, the research really starts. You decide you want to make an offer, then we really start digging in. And the agent, or what we do, is we are checking the MLS. We are reading those agent private notes. Obviously, requesting the disclosures is the first thing we want to do. And we're reading all of the instructions put forward by the listing agent for the offer and the deadline. being on both sides in real estate, we've been on the listing side as well. And it's always so frustrating when buyers agents don't read the instructions that we take the time to put out there. It makes everybody's lives easier. So your buyer's agent should definitely be reading the instructions and making sure that they're following them to a T to make everybody's life easier. We're then evaluating the competition. So this has multiple levels, but we are definitely studying the comparable sales from the last 90 days, looking in the correct radius, making sure you're staying in the right city, and finding the best comps. And then we're also evaluating inspections and upgrades against other similar sales to try and hone in on true value. I like to look at also how a particular agent prices homes and their sales history. There are usually patterns to how agents list their houses. Sometimes they list them super low and they sell for way over, and sometimes the reverse. They're notorious for listing high and then they sell under, potentially far under the list price. So we're getting as much info as we possibly can from the listing agent about the seller as possible before the offer deadline, if there is one, about any activity that there's been. How many guests in the open houses? How many people have requested disclosures? Have you had any preemptive offers? What are the seller's specific needs? And obviously, is there going to be other offers? Just asking the agent outright. And that's all of that information we can glean, put together, and formulate our offer in a way that stands out the brightest it possibly can against the other offers who maybe are not asking all of these questions. Because remember, all agents do business differently. Then we're knowing, what is your walkaway number? And this is sometimes confusing, but if you think about it like this, your number is the highest number you're willing to offer, where if somebody else offered $1 more than that amount, you are willing to walk away from that house and say, let him have it. If you know your walkaway number, the amount of competition doesn't matter because you're okay with the home at that price, at that monthly payment. If you win, great. If it goes higher, you walk. That's your walkaway number. So knowing that going in is going to provide so much clarity, especially when it comes down to potential counters or if it goes over or not. We're making sure the offer is all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, it's clean, it's filled out in entirety, and then we're submitting it on time, and then staying in communication with the agent afterward to ask, where do we stand? And then bonus points, as Jason said earlier, having that lender call the listing agent to plant even more trust in the buyer's financing is just a cherry on top of the cake. Because again, not all buyer's agents lender is going to do that. And that's a practice that we definitely stand by. I've had offers accepted because of that relationship and that trust that attached lender was able to instill in the listing agent. Gave them that confidence to say these guys are good to go. We're understanding counters, and the counters in the sense that a lot of buyers write an offer planning to receive a counter in hopes that they can go back and forth in negotiation. But the reality is you are never guaranteed a counter. There's never a certainty. Agents might say one thing 2 days prior to offers, and they'll say, yeah, we're planning on, countering everybody or maybe countering the top few. And then we get notice that they accepted the best offer. You have to remember, at the end of the day, it's the seller's decision, not the agent's decision, if they're going to do counters or not. So that one shot might be your only shot at getting your offer accepted. So know your walkaway number, offer your best and final, especially if you know it's going to be a competitive situation, which is often the case in our area. I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who's going to be talking about the next events that are coming up for our next workshops. And take it away.
All right. Way to go, Shannon. Thanks for covering everything like that. Offer process is always such an important thing. I did feel your passion, though, around agents who don't read the private notes. So sales prevention at its finest. But that's just a little fun realtor comedy on our side, what we see. But I think the thing to really drive home on this is in the Bay Area, like the winners aren't always just the people that are paying the most, right? They're the people that are prepared, decisive, and strategic. And as we could see, you don't always get that second chance, right? So just doing that work up front is so much more helpful. It goes anyways, like being prepared for a court case, like knowing you've got your taxes locked in, right? This is all really important stuff just to make sure that this becomes something that benefits your future, right? And I can't drive that home enough. So the last thing I wanted to note on that too, before we kind of wrap up and everything over here is, of course, thanks for sticking with us and getting through everything. Maybe this was just the basics for you. You're looking for advanced stuff. You're thinking about investing in other states, right? You're looking at, types of leverage, things like that. Those are all things that are much more advanced that we're always happy to talk about. So if that's more of your queue, just let us know. We're happy to dive into those things. We've got the right people when it comes to taxes, tax advice, everything across the board, right? Trying to get into flipping, investing, whatever you can really think of. There's tons of ways to do it. And that's the important part. Of course, for the individual buyer, right, this is going to be a really good blanketed explanation of what goes on over there. So for our next events that we've got coming up, we got our next buyer workshop. Say this wasn't enough. We're usually also changing it up a little bit each time just to throw in a new topic or something like that we can go over a little bit more. But that next one will be Thursday, February 26th at 6:30. And then that will also be online again. And then the very next one that we have is also our sellers workshop, which is in person this Saturday at 10 a.m. So we'll have coffee, pastries, all that good type of stuff. So if you're trying to figure out the complications of buying first, selling first, handling both sides consequently, understand how that all ropes together with capital gains, things like that. We've got you covered on that one. So that is who the seller workshop is for. So another thing is if you want to stay in the know and you feel like we offer good advice, things like that, make sure you go and check out the most watched real estate YouTube channel in the Bay Area. We get to celebrate that pretty soon. ChatGPT also likes us, so we've been liking that as well a little bit. But we do a thorough update each month. We got our annual predictions and we make sure that we keep it current. Tons of great stuff on there for just quick tips, seller, buyer, whatever you're looking for. We really get into a lot of specifics on there. So if you're looking for a little sprinkle of more of those formal meetings, those types of things, that's a great place to start just to equip you with that education and find who works best for you at the end of the day. So we've got the QR code up here with the channel link. So feel free to grab that, go subscribe, turn on notifications, whatever you would like to do. We're happy to be there to just offer education across the board. So with that, we're going to open it up for Q&A just with the panel. So hopefully we covered as much as we could. But if you've got questions, now is the time. Drop them in the chat. You're more than welcome to follow up with us after, and we're happy to dive into those things. So we'll give that a quick sec, see if anything comes across.
Thank you, Chris. We ended with about 15 minutes past today. Nice on time.
There we go. All right. So I'm not seeing anything come across yet. So what we're going to do is, even with today's great session full of information like today, we know a lot of this probably won't be retained. It's a lot. So really, here's our offer to you. If we're not just from an education perspective, we're committed to helping you. And we want to continue this workshop at a coffee shop or our office with absolutely no obligation. You can implement this plan with whoever you want. However, we just want to give you this bonus. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We had a great panel today. Thank you for everybody across the board. And hopefully we catch you on the next round.
Thank you, guys.